I don't think there's been a harder time to be a leader of human beings than right now because of all the change in the world, all the change with technology.
Wonderful. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. My guest today, Jim Fielding. Let's see. Let's read the CV. SVP North America Merchandising for Disney Store, President, Disney Stores Worldwide, CEO at Claire's, President, 20th Century Fox, doing so many cool speaking things, the author, All Pride, No Ego, writing 2 new books now. Jim, I'm so excited to chat with you. We've been pre-chatting for a while.
You
I
have yourself.
love your vibes. I love what you're up to. Hopefully I did your CV respectfully. You work with people, you get them, you love them. Tell me about you and your work.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up, Anthony. I feel, now with the benefit of hindsight, looking back on my long corporate career and my now solopreneur career, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I love people. I love human beings. I'm like a creature of I study human beings almost like going to a zoo, and I don't want that to sound gross, but I love consumer behavior, watching, when I was running retail, like watching how people shop online and offline, like just sitting outside stores and watching how the experience went. And I think, what, after writing the book, which admittedly was a side hustle to my full-time job, and the book kind of took off, and I started thinking about, okay, what are ways I can leverage what's happening with the book to allow me to spend more time with humans? Because I was definitely consulting and advising, but I was doing that primarily from home and, with a few clients and, occasionally being on site with the clients, and I was missing people. And, the speaking and the coaching is just very personal. And like you and I were talking about beforehand, I grew up as an IRL person. Like a lot of my stories and a lot of my experience is about working in offices or working with, global teams and different offices around the world. So the digital thing, I'm still learning and I like it. I think we all learned a lot during COVID from it. But I still like the opportunities to connect. And that's why I love doing podcasts too.
Awesome. So let's talk, in terms of our journey, let's start at talking about retail. Let's start talking about
Sure.
consumer behavior, what you see, whether that was
Yeah.
practical learning, what they took away, how that you thought
Mhm.
about them making decisions. And let's
Mhm.
move into the leadership, the kindness, the supporting
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
supporting teams, making teams. So retail, what did you learn? What did you take away? What did you find fascinating in your time observing behaviors and patterns and things like that?
Well, I feel like this is gonna make me sound old, but I feel like I lived through all these kind of mini revolutions within retail, right? Because when I started, I was a department store trainee, and department stores were the place that America, in particular America, shopped. And I'm talking the 80s. Then it became specialty stores, and I made the move to specialty stores, and I worked at the Gap for almost 10 years. And I say to everybody, that was like getting an MBA in retail because the Gap at that time in the late 80s and 90s was hot, hot, hot. And I was surrounded by brilliant, talented people and worked directly with Mickey Drexler, who was like the guru of specialty retail. Then I went to catalog at Land's End, catalog and then online. And a lot of people, Land's End, Wisconsin, a lot of people think they confuse it with LL Bean all the time. But to its credit, it was one of the first catalogs to launch a website. And that was in 1998, right? And so I was on the cutting edge then of e-commerce, right? So at Land's End, I learned about a catalog shopper and I learned about an e-commerce shopper and that transition. And you'll remember, many of your listeners will remember, especially my age, we would be in meetings and we'd be like, the American consumer is never going to put their credit card into a website. They're never going to trust it, right? Like it was like we all, especially all of us from the physical world, was like, and we would literally have people that would enter the order on the web, but then still mail us a check through the mail, right? Like those old days, like olden days. And then I made the flip to Disney, and really the end of my corporate retail career was, I would call it more experiential retail, right? So storytelling retail, retailtainment, merchantainment, all those words we used, at Fox, at Claire's, at Disney Store, at DreamWorks. It was really all about experience. And I loved being like at the intersection of story and product and experience and customer service. Like I loved that intersection. And that's really the consulting that I've done since I left the corporate world has really been in that space too. I mean, and I'm thrilled that people still think of me for those kind of. So I just completed a gig with the Los Angeles Clippers for their new arena in Los Angeles. Awesome. That was great. So, that's retail to me, but I've lived through all the changes in retail. It's constantly changing.
Do you see so obviously, cutting edge being digital, this like
Yeah.
hybrid, and then this like experiential retail.
Mm,
And as you have these legacy brands moving that have been around for a long
long
time,
time.
they're really considering like the holistic experience, the seamlessness. I potentially see a reversion to more brick and mortar, although it's expensive as hell, not scalable.
It
But
is.
but that like really being mindful of the entire experience because it's now like table stakes. Like everybody has to
For
recognize, hey,
sure.
the smells of it, the 4D experience. In your speaking, in your working, what are some of the things that people are asking themselves? What are their
Mm.
unknowns? What is, that next, not next frontier, but what don't they know about being able to create a high level experience from where you sit?
I think first off, Anthony, you completely hit the nail on the head. I mean, the word now is omni-channel, right? Basically meaning you have to be, if you're a brand and you're selling a product or a service, you have to be omnipresent in people's lives. And that means physical and digital. And you see a lot of quote digital native brands who are now building physical stores, to your point, or showrooms, or, they have different names for them. And I think the other frontier everybody's playing in now, and what I get asked a lot about is social commerce, right? So TikTok selling and Instagram selling and Facebook selling and I know my Instagram feed probably because I've shopped now and the algorithm knows I'm a social commerce person. But my Instagram feed, I feel like every fifth or sixth thing it's feeding me is a story about a product or a service and then a shop now link, right?
Mm.
And that to me is the next frontier. And I really admire brands who are willing to step back and do the strategic thinking that you're talking about and say, for our customer, for our demographic, where do we need to be interacting with him or her or them or the family? Physically, digitally, socially, a website, like an old-fashioned e-commerce website. Do we need to have a shop on Amazon? Do we need to have a shop? Like, there's all of those discussions and decisions now. And I think each brand's leadership team needs to make, each store or each brand's leadership team needs to make the decision that's right for them. I don't think it's the same. LA Clippers decision is very different because they have all those games, right? You have people coming to your stores basically because there's a game.
Mm.
You have natural traffic, I guess is what I'm saying. So, I think malls are reinventing themselves. High street shopping is reinventing themselves. I mean, the thing I love about the retail industry, and Lord knows I've been in it over 40 years now, it's constantly evolving and reinventing itself because it has to, because it's consumer driven.
Well, I think that's what's so fascinating about it is that there is no one size fits all. The
Mm-mm.
strategy component of it is critical, and the speed of change and
Mhm.
awareness. You have to be fast and proactive, but you
Mhm.
also can't be short-sighted. I saw, like, a thing
Yeah.
where I think it was, like, Nestle was trying to introduce and this was an Instagram reel, which
Yeah,
is where I
yeah.
get all my news. They're like, "We're
Yeah.
trying to introduce coffee to Japan." Well, we don't have coffee, so, like, start with, like, a candy so that when kids taste it in 20 years, it'll
Yes.
help you get into the market like 15 years from now. So like not just planning for 2025, 2030, but saying, "Hey, how does my brand," and, Disney and those type of organizations and Fox, they think forever because
Totally.
I
It
think that
takes
is Jiminy Cricket on
it
your
is,
so
yeah.
that's a 40-year-old movie that is still very present to you, and I
Mhm.
find that fascinating as a brand.
Yeah, totally, and I love that you say that because one of the things, now I'm in advising consulting role, but I really will not take a gig, honestly, and I'm not trying to sound arrogant, if someone's not at least doing like a 3 or 5-year plan, because I think some of these things take a while to execute, right? And I'm really not good with companies that come in and say, they want to change everything in 90 days. I mean, that's just not the way that I work. And, some people really want a consultant that comes in and says, I'm going to, hand you this manifesto in 60 days and everything's going to be milk and honey. I'm much more like, I actually like to be there a while and work on the execution because I think one of the things that's great about retail is you can test and roll.
Mm,
You can try some things. You can do some A B tests online. You can do A B tests in stores and see how the consumer reacts in different markets and how the consumer reacts to different offerings. And you don't have to bet the farm on these big ideas. You can really do some test and roll and take more calculated risks. I mean, I think retail is a risk-taking industry, but, I'm always advocating for doing calculated risks. Money is hard. And now right now, honestly, all of my clients in retail are talking to me about tariffs and the impact of tariffs, right? Because that plays with their supply chain and plays with their pricing and how much of that do they pass on to the consumer and all that. So you wake up every day in retail and you have a new variable that you have to contend with.
hmm. So let's talk, iterative testing. Let's talk
Yeah.
about incorporating these changes. Let's talk about driving the strategy forward. But let's look
Mhm.
look at the people side of it. So one of the things,
Totally.
talk about creating safe spaces, creating high performance culture, creating, trust. I find when we work with teams and we talk about, hey, we want to move this change forward. Well, change happens with people. I think they look at it as like an all or nothing kind of thing, but the
Yeah.
only way that it actually moves forward is by doing that incrementality, like talking to one human being at a time. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
driving these changes forward, both from a people, like just overall part, but also incorporating, hey,
Yeah.
here's the new vision and we need to get people bought in. The floor is yours.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a great question because especially like in this age of technology, in this age of AI, right? I get asked a lot, like, what jobs in retail or media are going to be eliminated with AI, blah, 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 blah. And the thing about and retail, especially experiential retail, you're still going to need people because in physical stores, I do not think in my lifetime like robots are going to be running the stores. I'm sure there's other people that you would have on here that would say that, but I'm not. And I think a perfect example of that is self-checkout. 5 years, 6 years ago, self-checkout was all the rage at like CVS and Walmart and Walgreens and Target. Now, if you look what's happening, they're taking all the self-checkout lanes out and they're going back to actually human beings ringing them up. Why? There was loss prevention issues, there was confusion issues, like there's a lot of issues. But at the end of the day, people still like a human being when they're like checking out that says thank you and looks at them and makes eye contact and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, for me, I would say my entire career, building cultures, globally, change management was a huge one of my school skill sets because you had to manage change, and you asked some pretty big questions there. I mean, it all starts with having the vision and the communication plan in place to explain what is the change and why are we making this change. And then to your point, taking it down to each individual member of the team and what does that change mean for me, right? So if it's a big change, you've got to have the time to do large group meetings, small group meetings, one-on-ones, two-on-ones, three-on-ones. It takes a while for that change to permeate your organization, particularly in these times of hybrid offices and in these global teams, like you have different time zones, different cultures, different languages. It takes a while to communicate change. And one of the stories I tell in the book, I always call it it's the train story, is what I realized managing human beings all these years and change is everybody reacts to change differently. And I liken it to like you're on a train platform and the train is leaving the station. And some people on your team will like literally get on the engine and drive the train. It's like they'll just jump and they'll just go, right? Then you have another group of people that are like, I think I'll wait a little bit and I'm going to take the first class car, right? I'm not necessarily the driver, but I'm going to take the first class car. Then you have the people that like get on second class. Then you have the people that kind of get on the baggage, cargo part. Then you have that caboose comment, and you've still got people on the platform, and you're like, are you going to get on the caboose? Like, because the change is happening and we're going on to the next station. And you see people hesitating, and you can literally see it in meetings. And I'm thinking, oh God, are they going to get on the caboose? Are they going to get on the caboose? Some people get on the caboose, which means they get on. And then, by the way, the train pulls out of the station for its next destination, and you still have people standing on the platform, right? That to me is change management. And you have to respect it does not mean they're not a good employee. It does not mean they're not a good team member or cast member who wants to be part of it. It just means that they absorb the change differently. And I had to learn that as a leader in that I had to respect the people that got on the engine and drove, and I had to respect the people that hung back on the platform. Now, if they're going to sit on the platform the entire time and just tell me the change isn't going to work, that's not
Your
a
trade
great.
sucks.
Exactly. I mean, that's not a great career move. But I respected and wanted to hear from all those people, the first class people, the second class people, the baggage people, the caboose people, because, like I said, change, people react to change differently.
And I'll just note, especially given the nature of your workout, if anybody clips this, he's talking about the first and second class folks on the
Oh,
train,
yes,
not as
the
human
seating,
beings. That is
not
as
as
a seating on the coin.
yes,
Okay.
God, thank you.
Just,
No.
context in the internet. So I think that there's fantastic parallels here. So you talked about, the customer experience, and then you talked
Mhm.
about the humanization of, in this case, the retail experience. But
Yeah.
I think at the heart of these work efforts is the humanization of work. And in some organizations, big organization where, like, oh, some folks potentially are viewed as a cog or a resource or
Yeah.
whatever, like there is human beings behind this. And then the
Yes.
analogy between the train is, those people that everybody starts on the platform, are they following the train? Are they following the conductor? Are they following the destination? And then for all
Mhm.
of those things is there is a human element, there is a individual
Mhm.
component to like what's in it for them. And if they are standing on the platform,
Totally.
consider that they're not bought into the destination, they're not bought into the vehicle, and they're not bought into the people. And if you want to get them on board, one of those three kind of ingredients. And if it's none of those three, then they're great. They shouldn't be on the train because there's nothing for them, which is okay. I
It
think is
is.
what you were saying.
I am, and I think yeah, thank you so much. I think again, that's leadership, quote, management's job is to me, that's what we used to call situational leadership. It's your job as the leader or manager to adapt your communication and your style to those different buckets that you just explained, right? And know what their motivation is, know what their fears are, know what their questions are. Like you have to be an active listener. And again, it depends on the scope of the change, right? If it's a small change, I think it can go faster, right? But if you're talking about like a major strategic shift or opening a new country, like a Disney store in Claire's, at Claire's, we opened China as a country. I mean, that was a major strategic initiative that impacted everybody. Those kind of big changes, it's like having the grace with yourself and having the grace with your team to put the time in to know that you're going to have to over communicate. And I used to say to my direct report teams when it was a biggie, I'm like, I need not only me, I need all of you to be over communicating. And because we know from research, it takes an adult learner 10 to 14 times to hear something to fully understand it. We're not like kids. Kids are sponges. Kids can learn something in two or three. Like, look at languages, right? Kids under 5 can learn languages so fast because the brain's different. But with adult learners and adult employees, it can take 10 to 14 times before somebody like the light comes on for them. And it's not bad. And that's not bad. It's just the reality.
It's just how they are and how they have become wired, so there's an unlearning. Okay,
Mhm.
so let's take, in one of our last questions here or
Sure.
fields, we think about executives, we think about leadership.
Yes.
All of this change happens with leadership. And it's
Yes.
very easy for a leader who sits in their office, has often nobody to talk to say, "Oh, my people are terrible. Why don't they listen to me? They don't like me. What's their problem?" The book, All Pride, No Ego, and everything you talk about, is presumably removing ego from oneself so that you have that
Yes.
commitment to the other people.
Yes.
How do you view the intersection of executives needing to have posture with the kind of seemingly conflicting no ego as a leader as they drive forward these future
Mhm.
changes, whatever they might be?
No, I mean, I think it's a really important question. And I explain in the book, I mean, of course I have ego, right? People are like, you could have never been what you were and work for the company you did. Every one of us have ego. I mean, really what the book is about is to your point, controlling the ego and using the ego appropriately.
Mm.
And I think that to be a leader of human beings today, and by the way, I tell my coaching clients this, my speaking clients this, I don't think there's been a harder time to be a leader of human beings than right now because of all the change in the world, all the change with technology. And I think, leaders are superheroes. I really do think that. And a lot of the work that I do with them is everyone has strengths and developmental opportunities or strengths and weaknesses. And a lot of the work that I do, I think leaders today have to be extremely self aware and have to know what they're good at and what they're not good at, because all leaders have things that they're not good at. And then you look at their direct report team or the people they put around them and you say, okay, well, if you're not so great at that particular skill, do you have a strong CFO? Do you have a strong and chief people officer or a chief creative officer? Because to me, I've always operated with a two heads are better than one. And I was never that leader that wanted to sit in my office and like issue memos or issue emails and say, do this, do this, do this, do this, right? I literally wanted to get idea generation from anywhere. And I think that's the way you have to lead today. And I think, to your point, physically, digitally, hybrid, however you're managing your team, you've got to quote, get out of the office, right? You've got to get out of behind closed door, interact with your teams, see what they're working on, let them ask you questions, and be humble. This is where the ego thing comes in. Be humble and vulnerable enough. If somebody asks you a question, you're like, I don't know that answer, but that's a good question. Let me get back to you. And then write it down and get back to that person, right? Because you owe them that. And I think, we used to call it management by walking around. Again, I'm a field person, I'm a physical person. I was a district manager at one time. I had 15 stores. I would make sure I was in every one of those stores every week. Even if it was for a half an hour, right? I would get there because the only way to really lead and motivate that team was to be on the ground with them and understand what they were dealing with and their particular physical location. Same thing. I had global, Disney, Claire's, DreamWorks. I had global. That meant I was on the road a lot. I was in Japan. I was in Latin America. I was in Europe because, again, how the German team feels about something is completely different than what the Canadian team feels, is completely different than what the Mexican team feels. And it's your job as a leader to understand that. And to me, a leader creates physically and psychologically safe spaces for people to bring their best. That's my theory in a nutshell. If I create a great work environment for you where you feel respected and trusted and seen, you will bring the best. I'm a capitalist. Like I was a CEO, I was a president. I wasn't running nonprofits. I had to make money, bluntly. I had to make money for the shareholders. I had to make money for my bosses, right? And so, but my theory was if I created those kind of environments, I get the best and the brightest. And listen, working in Hollywood, working in Los Angeles, it was competitive for the best talent. Your people would get poached all the time.
Mm.
And it wasn't about money. You know this, Anthony. It wasn't about somebody paying them more or giving them a new title. It was always about culture, environment, and where they were working, right? And so if I wanted the best team in experiential retail, in licensing and merchandising, in consumer products, I needed to create an environment where I attracted and retained the best.
Yeah, I mean, so much there. So first of all, I think just the commitment to kindness, and you never use the word kindness, but like it just strikes me as, like there's a
Yeah.
fairness, there's a hey, developmental opportunities instead of saying
Yes.
weaknesses, you suck at something.
Yes. Yes.
I think that those that have worked in retail can recognize, and unfortunately I never did, can recognize the kind of special hell it is because, shout out my friend Daryl Louie, who worked at the Gap in Oak Ridge, doesn't mean anything to most of our global listeners,
Oh,
but like every one of those things is somebody is leaving their world. They are still in their world. They're entering your world, just like I work in hospitality.
yes.
It's that micro interaction that, you're trying to like take them along this path. And so what I hear from you as a leader, your management by walking around, is you are taking that same retail experience to make sure, hey, this person has their world. I am temporarily entering it to support them with their goals and objectives. If I'm not doing that, and folks that have never worked in shitty jobs, you want to stay in your office because it is safe, but safe is not where it makes a big difference
It
for
doesn't.
other people because they're not in your world. You need to get into their world.
I mean, here's a perfect example, and I love that you were in hospitality. I work with a lot of college students, like undergrad and grads. I tell everybody they should work in hospitality, retail, or wait tables, like one of those service businesses, because to me, that is putting yourself in your customer's shoes. But here's a great example. When I was CEO of Claire's, president of Disney Store, in your stores in Manhattan, they get shipment at midnight. You're not allowed to receive stock during the day in Manhattan because of the traffic, right? So that would mean when I was in Manhattan, I'd be in that store at midnight receiving stock with them because I wanted to see what that looked like. Like I wanted to work with the overnight crew. And yeah, that meant I was opening boxes and putting, stuffed animals on shelves and things. But I it was one of the only cities in the world where we had overnight crews, right? Because that they got their shipments at midnight. On the sidewalk in many cases, we had to have security guards, right? Because the boxes would just get thrown on the sidewalk and then you'd have to run them into the store. But I would be there doing that with them because I wanted to learn. It's not like I was there every time, but whenever I went to Manhattan, I would always do a schedule where, I had one of my days at noon and I'd go rest and then I'd pop back into the store at like 11 p.m. because I wanted to see what it was like. And I didn't want them to tell me, I wanted to feel it.
Yeah. Because you can't. It's not the same, and the perspective is reality, and everybody's reality is true to them, and you can't
Yes.
actually connect with somebody until you understand their
Yeah.
reality and experiencing,
Completely.
which,
Completely.
okay, time flies when you're having fun. I'm sure you talk
Yeah.
a lot. People can listen to Jim more on his podcast. You're writing more books. What is
Mhm.
upcoming for you, and how can people connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way, my website is jimfielding.com, and it is me if you connect there. Jim Fielding on LinkedIn. Hi, Jim Fielding on Instagram. I have new books coming out. To your point, the podcast is called Jim Fielding and Friends on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And yeah, I post every day on LinkedIn. We've talked a little bit about it. I mean, people laugh. They're like, if I send you a message on LinkedIn, is it really you? Yes, it's me. Like I do my own comment. It's not like I have this overwhelming inbox of messages, but I love connecting with people. It's why I do your podcast and podcasts like yours. It's why I did my own podcast, and it's why I go out and do speaking gigs and book gigs and things like that. So I learn all the time. I am a lifelong learner and constantly curious. I say that all the time. And every person I connect with, I learn something from. And I love that. I never want to be done. I want to learn something new every day.
Excellent. Well, I love it. Well, I think, hearing about the growth and development from the 90s to the 2000s,
Yeah.
the 2010 to 2020, who knows what 25, 2030 is going to be, whatever
Yeah.
Zennial thing, Gen X, Gen Y. But super grateful for your sharing, super grateful for
Yeah.
who you are in the world, for human
Thank you.
beings, and just keep doing the great work that you're doing. And
Thank you so much.
we'll talk next time.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Folks, my guest today, Jim Fielding, one of the things is, walking in with caring, walking in with understanding, being able to drive big results, being able to make money, help people doing it. In order to do that, you got to walk the walk, you got to talk the talk, you got to understand your people. I'm super grateful. Check out his book, All Pride, No Ego. You can find him on LinkedIn. Hi, H-I, not H-I-G-H. Glad you clarified that one. Jim Fielding, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you being here. If you like the show, be sure to like, subscribe, do all those things, share with your friends, tell your mom, and I will see you next time.